If you know absolutely nothing about 3D resin printing but want to give it a go, then this video is for you.
Biff, pow, zap, clunk, clunk, ouchie.
Hey guys! A buddy of mine recently got himself a resin printer and, as you might expect, he started bombarding me with questions. Now, I've done a lot of videos about 3D printing and I tried steering him to those. But the experience quickly made me realise that there were a lot of things I'd previously taken for granted, leaving things a little unclear for the absolute beginner. So this video requires absolutely no prior knowledge of resin printing, and by the end of it, you should possess everything you need to know to get on with printing confidently on your own. It's going to be a little disjointed initially, but eventually everything will make sense. So let's crack on. You may already have a printer, in which case you can ignore this section. But if you haven't, let me just offer you a little warning. Resin printing is a horrible, sticky, smelly, messy process, and it's not for everyone. You certainly don't want it anywhere near children or pets, as the resins themselves can be quite nasty stuff. So, if you've never tried resin printing, my advice is don't spend a fortune on it. Begin with a budget printer and then see how things go. There's a link in the description that will take you to a list of my recommended budget printers, and these won't break the bank, but will certainly produce great results. If you begin with a budget printer and you like it, in time you can always upgrade to something a little better. But if you absolutely hate it, you can always clean everything up and sell it on. That way, at least you'll get back some of the money that you've spent. But if you're hell-bent on taking up resin printing and prefer to ignore my advice about beginning on a budget, there's another link in the description that will help you decide which printer is ideal for you. Just answer the questions and it should help you wade through the many possibilities. When it comes to equipment, it's not just about the printer. There are other things that you'll need. Resin is nasty, sticky stuff and you don't want it on your skin, so you'll need disposable gloves. Usually you get a few pairs of these with your printer, but you'll need a lot more, so get a box full. Typically with your printer, you'll get a metal scraper. This is to remove prints from the build plate, and if you don't know what that is, I'll be coming back to it in a moment. You'll probably also get a plastic scraper or spatula. This is used for stirring the resin. You might get some clippers, but that's not always the case these days, so I'd recommend buying some of these as they're always needed. You'll probably also get some paper filters, but typically no funnel, so you may need to buy one of those. When you finish printing, you should empty the resin back into the bottle. Always make use of one of these paper filters, as small pieces of cured resin can break off during printing, and if these are left within the resin, you might end up with a cracked screen. You'll probably get a flimsy face mask, which is absolutely pointless. Throw it away, it achieves nothing. Resins can be very smelly and give off fumes that can give folks headaches. Ventilation is crucial, so have lots of windows open. But if you're really safety minded, you should invest in a respirator. This may seem a little paranoid, but quite honestly, there are fumes involved, and right now we have no real idea of any possible long-term side effects, so a sensible person would certainly wear a respirator. Eye protection is another must. Of course, there's going to be spills, so you will need plenty of paper towels. Most resins are not water-based and need an alcohol solution to clean them. The usual choice is IPA. Some folks will go with methylated spirits as it's usually very affordable. Personally, I favour ethanol, and in particular this bioethanol. Again, buying one bottle of cleaning solution will get you nowhere. I typically buy a case of 12, and if you think that's overboard, wait until the next item. resin prints need to be washed and UV cured. You can get away with washing prints in a small jar or maybe with a spray bottle, but you will still need to UV cure your prints, or else they may remain tacky and can even crack if not cured. I know folks that have cured prints using a nail varnish UV lamp and a box lined with foil, but ideally you want a curing station. In most cases now, a curing station typically comes as a washing and curing station, and these do exactly what the name suggests. You don't need to go with brand specific, any sort will do. The only thing you need to take into account is size. Resin printers are typically in 3 sizes: small or standard, medium and large. You'll need a washing and curing station that matches the size of your printer. If you go with my budget printer recommendation, then you just need a small one. And any one will do. Just head over to Amazon, search for the cheapest, and as long as the reviews don't trash it, there's your choice. And these washing stations get filled with your cleaning solution, which is the IPA, the methylated spirits, or the ethanol, and this can take several bottles. Finally, of course, you'll need resin, but I'm going to come back to that in a moment. How does resin printing work? This seems a bit of a digression, but bear with me as it's important. Firstly, a bit of terminology about a typical resin printer. There's the Z-arm. This raises and lowers the build plate. The build plate is the object upon which prints are built, hence the name. There's a screen which projects ultraviolet or UV light, and this is the heart of any resin printer. On top of this goes the resin tray. This obviously holds the resin. Typically it has a clear, thin, flexible plastic liner at the bottom, which is usually called a FEP or FEP. Getting back to how it works now, it's important to realise that the resin is a liquid which hardens when exposed to UV light, specifically on a wavelength of 405 nanometers. Now you don't need to worry about the 405 part, as personally I've never come across a 3D printer or even a resin that doesn't work on that wavelength. So resin is poured into the tray. The build plate lowers until it nearly touches the FEP, leaving a tiny gap. The printer projects UV light from the screen through the FEP and onto the build plate. This causes the resin to harden, sticking to the plate and the FEP. Then the Z-arm raises the build plate a little, tearing the print from the flexible FEP, but leaving it behind on the build plate. The build plate lowers once more, again leaving a tiny gap. The screen projects, the resin hardens, the plate raises, and slowly a print is produced from hundreds and even thousands of tiny layers of resin, each built on top of the last. When it comes to what to print, you'll need a 3D model file, and these typically come in the format of STL files or OBJs. There are other formats, but these two are the most common. If you visit a model library like Thingiverse, Printables or Cults 3D, you'll usually find lots of 3D models which you can download for free, and that means downloading STL or OBJ files. To convert these files into information that the printer can use to print the 3D model, we need a piece of software called a slicer. In case you hadn't guessed, this takes the model and reduces it to hundreds or even thousands of thin layers or slices, so the printer can produce them in the way that we've just seen. Now there are a good few slicers out there, but probably the best known are Lychee and Chi2 Box. Well, I'm going to be a little controversial and recommend you head over to lychee.co and download their free slicer. Okay, everyone has their favourites and Lychee is mine, but trust me, this is not about that. This is about getting a complete newbie started as easily as possible. You will need to register and create an account with Lychee, and when you're using the free slicer, you will have to watch an advertisement or two. but for what comes next, it's a small price to pay. So, coming back to resin, which should you buy? What a newcomer needs is a well-known resin that will print easily and doesn't cost a fortune. Now, just because you might have, for example, an Anycubic printer, it doesn't mean that you can't use an vegoilguy resin, and vice versa. As long as the resin works on a 405 wavelength, and they pretty much all do, you'll be fine. So to make your selection of resin, head over to the Amazon website. In the search box, type in Anycubic 3D resin. You're going to see a lot of things crop up, but I'd recommend ignoring everything and looking for something that's low cost with a popular review level. When you find one, add it to your basket, but do not buy it just yet. Now we do exactly the same thing, but type in vegoilguy 3D resin. Again, we find the best match according to reviews and value for money, and then we add the bottle to the basket. With that done, here's 3 more searches that I'd recommend. Finally, if none of these are a match for your printer, let's say you have a uniformation, then by all means run a search using that too, adding the results to your basket but not buying them just yet. The thing that scares everyone when it comes to resin printing is slicer settings. These really can be confusing, so much so that I'm not going to cover them in this video. And if you know how important these settings are, you're probably already calling me various names and questioning my parentage. But trust me, I'm actually making life easy for you. Instead of worrying about those settings, I want you to open up your free Lychee slicer. You'll need to tell it exactly which printer you've got, and that's simply a matter of selecting your model from the many that are available. With that done, you'll need to add settings for your resin profile, and that can be brown trousers time for the newcomer. But here's the cunning bit. Lychee maintains a library of profiles that have been shared by their users. So if we're clever, we can use these shared settings as a way of deciding which resin you should buy. If I return to my Amazon basket, the first thing in my list is an Anycubic Standard Grey, and grey is actually a great colour for printing. It shows far more details than bright colours like yellow or white. But anyway, it's pointless you buying this resin if you don't know the settings, so let's ask the Lychee slicer. So where we've added our printer, beneath this we can see Add a New Resin. If we click that, then we'll get a list of community profiles. All you need to do is enter the name of the resin that you're looking for, in this case Anycubic Standard Grey. Now if we look at the top line, we can see that this particular shared profile has been used by over 500 people and validated by 16 users. So that's a pretty good recommendation that these settings will work for you. But let's not do anything just yet. Instead go to your second basket item, in my case vegoilguy ABS like resin. Let's go to the community profile, enter this, and look at that. The top line now says 85% success rate with over 50 prints, so that's even better than the Anycubic resin we just looked at. And in case you hadn't guessed, I'd recommend doing this for all the resins in your basket. When it comes to choosing resin, folks often stick with the same brand as their printer. Believe me, you really don't have to. But by going through this easy process, you can find an affordable resin with a suitable profile. And then all you need to do is click the Add New Resin button. And now you have a complete profile that will enable you to print, and you haven't had to worry about all those nasty settings. Now go back to your Amazon basket, delete all the ones that you don't want to buy, and buy the one that's suitable. Now that you have everything that you need, all that remains is to make sure that your build plate is leveled properly. Again, this is extremely important, and it's something I've covered before. As this video is already getting quite long, I'm not going to cover it here, but please do visit that video for instructions on unboxing your printer and, most critically, leveling the build plate. If the plate isn't leveled properly, you can almost guarantee print failures. Some budget printers are claiming to be self-leveling these days, and the jury is still out on them at the time of this video. There seems to be some evidence suggesting that this relies heavily on the printer being properly leveled before leaving the factory, but I need to see more details about that before I draw any definite conclusions. All I can say right now is this: leveling is important. Make sure it's done right. So now you've got a correctly set up printer, a bottle of resin, and a slicer with a profile that will bring everything together. Unfortunately, something that is very often overlooked, and which again is very important, is temperature. These resins typically require an ambient temperature of at least 25 degrees Celsius. If they dip lower than that, prints often fail. Personally, I live in the UK and print in my garage. Right now it's October and a typical temperature in there is 14 degrees Celsius, which is well below what's necessary. Some printers are now coming with built-in heaters, but most don't. Now, I've advocated the use of heaters for a few years now, and I've even made a couple, but most folks will probably find it easiest to buy one. And G2 Systems do a nice compact heater that does a great job and generally slides inside most enclosures. Again, this is an important topic. Even if you live in a warm environment, temperatures can often fall at night, and this can lead to failed prints. Please take a look at this video, as it will give you more information and give you a few ideas on how to cope with cooler temperatures. However, let's now assume that your resin is nice and warm and you've poured some of this into the resin tray ready to go. So what should you print? You probably already have plans for what you're aiming to do with your resin printer, but right now I would urge you to resist that temptation. Instead, head over to a model library and search for pre-supported or support-free models. Supports are a necessary part of resin printing, but the complete newbie can often run into trouble here. I've got a video dedicated to supports, and whilst it's a little dated now, the principles remain true, and it's helped a lot of people understand just how, where and why supports are needed. So please do check out that video. But right now, let's ignore supports. For your first print, you can print the example model that comes with the printer on the USB stick, which is typically a rook or a geometric shape. Or you can gain a little more confidence by printing something that you've chosen yourself, but again, something that you don't need to worry about supporting. If you visit Thingiverse, Printables or Cults 3D and run a search for VogMan, you'll find that I've uploaded a few pre-supported and support-free models. I would recommend that you go with a pre-supported, like this mini VogMan or these ORCS. Now, I get that these might not be your kind of thing, but this is about getting you started in printing. Printing one of these will test your resin, your profile, your slicer and your printer. It also means that you've got to clip away supports and in some cases even do a little assembly. All of which is easy, but it will give you good experience at handling resin prints. So let's use the example of my mini VogMan print. Some libraries shove everything into one folder and you end up downloading a zipped bundle. Here on Printables, you can choose individual files, so read the file names carefully. This one is for FDM printers. This one is resin but unsupported. This one is supported, but it's an extra large model. But this bottom one is the supported resin print we want, so I'll download it to my PC. Back in my slicer, I need to import the model that I want to print. This lands neatly in the middle of my virtual build plate. I don't need to add any supports as they're already included. So we can head over to the Export tab. On the right here, we can see the printer I've added and the resin profile I've imported. And I don't need to do anything else now other than click Export Slices to File. You'll likely have to suffer an advertisement at this point, after which Leechy will ask where I want to export the file to, and this typically should be to the thumb drive that came with the printer. Leechy will slice the model into layers and instruct your printer in what it needs to do. Plug the thumb drive into your printer and click print. Search for the file and sit back and wait for everything to happen. Eventually, you'll need to remove the build plate from the printer and free your print using the metal scraper. You'll also need to remove supports with the clippers, though some folks just like to pull them off. This can cause a little damage, so I prefer clipping. But after this, you'll need to wash the print and cure it. There's no instructions on how long to clean or cure anything. Cleaning is usually just a couple of minutes, and curing on something small like this is maybe for 5 minutes. But for something larger like this, I'd probably cure for about 20 minutes. And that's it, you're good to go. Print, clean and cure a few things. Get covered in sticky resin and discover if this hobby is really for you. Hopefully this video will help you avoid the frustrations and pitfalls associated with profile and leveling issues that cause most newbies to fail. And once your confidence has grown, you can support your own models. You might want to experiment with different resins and even different slicers, but by then you'll know that you can print. And in fact, with a little time and effort, you know that you'll be able to print with the best of them. And that ends this epic video, which hopefully takes you from zero knowledge to a successful print. So that's it for this video, guys. Take care and happy printing.